Imagine, if you will, a toy car. It's easy. There were several. Hot Wheels, Matchbox, Johnny Lightning, all very cool, right? But what if you want to make them even cooler? You could shrink them down like micro machines. We talked about them in this episode up there. Or maybe you could make them transform. GoBots, Transformers, we've talked about them as well. But is there anything else you could do to make them cool? I mean, like, what if you motorized them? Bet that would be cool. It was. Today on Rewind Toys, we're going to be taking a deep dive into a line of toy cars that did just that added a motor. Today on Rewind Toys, we're going to be telling you about the Stompers. Now, I wish I could tell you there's some magical story behind the creation of Stompers, but the truth is they came from the mind of a man named Adolf Eddie Goldfarb. Now, Goldfarb was an inventor and a toy maker, and he had been doing this since 1949 when he invented something called the Yakety Yak talking teeth. Most of you would probably know them as chattering teeth. Yeah, the same guy who invented chattering teeth also went on to invent Stompers, but we'll get there. Now, Goldfarb would invent more than 800 different toys, and he would hold patents on nearly 300. You probably know a few of them, like Kerplunk or the giant bubble gun. All right, so at this point, it's like 1978, 1979, and Goldfarb, he sees the popularity of toy cars, and he gets the idea that he wants to create a small, affordable toy car himself, only he wants one that could mimic the off-road capabilities of a 4x4 truck. I mean, we're nearing the 80s. This was the era of off-roading and monster trucks, after all. So what better way to grab a kid's attention? Do you guys remember Bigfoot? If you were around in the 80s, you remember Bigfoot. This is Bigfoot. He was everywhere. So his plan is to make a toy with like true four-wheel action, all powered by a single AA battery using a simple setup of motors and gears, 2 rotating axles, and some beefy, oversized tires. Anyway, he gets to work, and eventually he makes Stompers. Stompers were really cool, too. Those tires were made up of this softer foam, which not only acted like a shock absorber for the toys, a fact that helped preserve longevity of the car's axles, but it also afforded the car a better system of traction for climbing over rougher terrains. Now, Stompers were modeled after real vehicles, but they didn't look exactly like the real deal. They were close, but not exactly. Instead, they were made to look just a little bit tougher and a little more rugged. And Goldfarb, he was sure he and his team had another hit toy on their hands, but the toy manufacturers, they weren't. He presented these little dynamos to both Mattel and Ideal, and they both passed. And it's odd to me that Mattel would pass. I'm surprised they didn't just try to integrate these into the Hot Wheels line. Had it been a few years later, I'm betting they would have, because they started to expand the Hot Wheels line. Anyway, Goldfarb moved on, and it was starting to look like he was going to score a deal with Kenner. But at the last minute, they too decided to pass. And that's when a man named Bill Garrity, the president of a failing toy company named Shaper Toys, stumbled upon them. And much like Eddie Goldfarb, Shaper Toys had been around since 1949. They were the company that gave us games like Cooties, Don't Break the Ice, and Ants in the Pants. By 1980, though, Shaper was struggling. They were going bankrupt, and bringing in Bill Garrity had been sort of a last-ditch effort to try and save the company. Garrity needed a fresh idea, and he knew about Goldfarb, and so he gave him a call. Now, as soon as Garrity saw Goldfarb's Stomper concept, he was in. He just sort of got it. The two teams got to work, and before you know it, Stompers had hit the market, and they became a massive success for Shaper. They practically saved the company, and they helped to make Bill Garrity the new golden boy. Hey guys, why don't you roll on down to that subscribe button? There's a thumbs up down there too. You can click them both in like less than 3 seconds, and it would help us out a ton, and we love having you guys here every week, so why don't you just do me the favor and stomp on those. Yeah. All right, let's get back to it. So yeah, as soon as Stompers hit the market, they became an immediate hit, and because they did, other companies decided they wanted in. LJN, for example, released a line called Rough Riders. Here they are. and there was a line in the UK called Trekkers. But nothing was quite the same as the original. Now, that first line of Stompers was made up of 5 vehicles. There was a Chevy K10 Scottsdale, a Chevy Blazer, there was a Ford Bronco, a Jeep Honcho, and a Dodge Warlock. They would go on to release a number of different vehicles, like several over the years. There was the Datsun Little Hustler, the Baja Bug, there was a Subaru Brat, even semi-trucks. Shaper would release dozens of cars. They would go on to create a series that used D-cell batteries for more power called Monster 4x4s. There was an amphibious line called Water Demons. There was Future Force and Super Dragsters and more. They would also give us, what I think is one of the coolest things about Stompers, playsets. There was Rocky Ridge. There was Devil Mountain. I actually had that one, and it was really neat. I mean, it was fun to play with the Stompers on Devil Mountain. There was Wild Canyon. There was Action Track, and they had like little logs the trucks had to climb over and stuff. I mean, they were great. Now, eventually, Shaper would sell to Tyco, and they would continue making these mighty little trucks. That was until around 1992 when they would stop. After that, a few more companies picked them up. There was DreamWorks. They had a line in 1992. Peachtree Playthings ran a line from 97 to 99. And then Tenco in 2001 and 2002. But they haven't been produced since then. Now, today, these are highly collectible, especially those early ones, with prices ranging from like $20 to $50 and even over $300 for loose ones, assuming they're in good working order, and carded ones being sometimes in the hundreds. I've seen playsets go for thousands. Even broken ones sometimes sell. Now, personally, I loved Stompers as a kid. I have some really great memories of these toys, and I remember a couple of really distinct things about Stompers. Very distinct things. The first was that electric smell the cars gave off. If you've ever played with them, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. It was this like ozone smell, like when lightning had just ripped its way across the sky. It's that, right? It's like one of those core memories. The second thing I remember was that Stompers had this almost magical ability to seek out long hair and get tangled up in the axles. This actually happened to my sister. I remember the night it happened specifically. No, it wasn't my fault. I've heard stories of this very thing happening to people out there all the time. So again, you might have your own memories of that. I'm not much in the world of die-cast. Stompers aren't die-cast. They were actually made out of plastic. But in the world of collecting toy cars, it's not really my thing. I know there's a huge market and a big following for die-cast cars out there, but not really my thing. But Stompers, on the other hand, there was just something different about them and something that just kind of made me want to own them. And I think to have a few today on display on one of my shelves would be a really hip thing. But what about you guys? Do any of you have Stompers? Were you big into Stompers? Did you collect Stompers? Well, as always, let us know in the comments, guys. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we hope you come back next week. If there's a specific toy you would love to hear us talk about, drop it in the comments. And until next time, guys, when it comes to these cool little cars, remember, the hunt, still half the fun.